According to the records, the Dave incident is the greatest evidence that Michael Jackson is alive. After this incident, millions of Michael Jackson fans began to believe that Michael Jackson was alive. We will examine the background of this crazy act of Michael Jackson. Today, as we examine the tragic and message-filled story behind Michael Jackson's Dave disguise, we will talk about Dave's painful life. Then, right after Dave's story of meeting Michael, we will talk about the reasons behind Michael's disguise as Dave. How does a father want to burn his own child to death? This is the murderous father, Charles Rothenberg. Now let's start with that tragic event that affected Dave's life. Dave's father, Charles, married the love of his life, Marie Rothenberg, in 1970. The couple gave birth to their first child, David Rothenberg, whom we know as Dave, 6 years after their marriage. Unfortunately, their marriage was progressing quite aggressively, as Charles often beat his wife. After suffering enough beatings and harassment, Marie filed for divorce in 1980 to separate from Charles. Charles was famous for committing different crimes in the United States. He was a cruel man from an early age and was regularly harassing and beating his wife. The divorce proceedings were finalized immediately, and the couple separated. Charles Rothenberg couldn't tolerate the divorce. He had made a cruel plan to get revenge on his divorced wife. The reason for revenge was the custody case of his son. So, his ex-wife wasn't showing David. She told Charles that she would never see his son again. So, Charles said, "If I can't see my son, no one can," and planned to inflict punishment on his wife. On March 26, 1983, 3 years after their separation, Charles kidnapped his son David to California and took him to a motel there. He had tricked his son by saying he was going to take him on vacation with the promise of visiting Orange County theme parks. Evil Father Charles spread kerosene on David's bed after giving his son sleeping pills and set him on fire. He had such an evil heart to burn his own son to punish his wife. But Creator had shown a miracle to 6-year-old David. David miraculously survived the attack and was immediately rushed to the hospital. However, more than 90% of his body had suffered third-degree burns. This caused him to undergo both a toe and finger amputation and skin grafts over the face. He was just 6 years old and was brutally left to die by his own father. The fact that David Rothenberg survived the incident and continued his fight for life attracted public attention and caused great sadness and concern among people. The father Charles was arrested and charged with the attempted murder of his 6-year-old son. In July 1983, he was sentenced to 13 years in prison. However, after serving his 7-year sentence, he was released on 3-year supervised probation in 1990, but he escaped from the prison in his 2nd year. However, in 1996, he was arrested and tried for a shooting incident in Oakland. In 1996, Dave, who was 19 years old at the time, met his father for the first time since the incident in which he was burned and injured. Dave, who wanted to close an era in his life, wanted to spill his guts and get rid of his father by reading a text he wrote to his father In the text of this statement, he stated that his father was an imposter, not a father, and that he wished his father to be able to experience the trauma and pain that I have experienced. David, who also wanted to get rid of his father's last name, later legally changed his name to Dave, saying This is to liberate me from the confines of my father's crime. In 1998, Charles Rothenberg changed his name to Charlie Charles. Then, in 2007, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for gun crimes under California's three strikes law after being convicted of several felonies in 2 states. Public defender Gabriel Bassan, who has been defending Charles since 2001, said he would appeal the decision. The case was sent back to the lower court because the Court of Appeals did not impose the 25-year to life sentence itself, but instead ordered a new sentencing hearing to be held in San Francisco County Court. But there was no reduction in the penalty. In 1985, David's mother published a book named David. In 2019, Mel White and Marie Rothenberg published an expanded version of the book, which they called David's Story, Burned by His Father's Rage, Healed by His Mother's Love. In 1988, a film adaptation of Marie's first book of the same name, David, was also made. The film told the real-life story of David Rothenberg, who was burned by his father when he was 6 years old. After Dave's mother, Marie Rothenberg, divorced Charles, she married Richard Halfdaffel, a police officer who oversaw the investigation of the fire. Later, Marie, Richard, and David moved to Orange County, California, USA. It is known that Marie is still alive now. And what happened to the evil father Charles? It is known that Charles Rothenberg is still alive at the age of 83 and is currently serving a life sentence in California. In other words, we can say that he is waiting for his punishment in the afterworld after his punishment in this world, along with the countless crimes he has committed and the sin of a child whose life he has darkened. So, what happened to Dave? And how did he meet Michael? He made headlines when the king of pop, Michael Jackson, became close friends with him, even hiring him as part of his team in the 1980s. Dave was a boy who defied the odds by surviving despite 90% of his body being burned. He had a great sense of humor. He also had a great talent. It was incredible that he could sculpt and paint when his fingers were so badly damaged. Dave had many physical limitations. His hands were burned down to their first joints, and he had no thumbs. So, despite this, it was an incredible talent that he made great works. Jackson had contacted to meet him, saying he was impressed by his wonderful paintings. Dave, who met Michael, said of Michael, "Michael told me I was the greatest artist in the world." Bowman, Dave's friend, said Jackson treated Dave like a little brother and always invited him to Neverland for days at a time. Michael was very interested in Dave, because Michael could imagine how much Dave was suffering. On January 27, 1984, Michael Jackson had an accident during the filming of a commercial for a Pepsi commercial. During the commercial shoot, fire, smoke, and explosion effects were used on the stage. And during this, Michael Jackson's hair caught fire as a result of an explosion that occurred on the stage. The fire was extinguished by immediate intervention, and Jackson suffered burn injuries to his face and hair. As a result of this incident, Michael Jackson experienced serious pain and had to undergo long-term treatment for burns. Also, as a result of this accident, there were changes in Jackson's physical appearance, and by that time, his dark hair had started to turn white. After the Pepsi accident, his hair had been severely damaged and had fallen out and been partially destroyed due to the burns. His hair did not return to its former state after the accident, and Jackson had to cover his hair for a while using a wig. After a while, as a permanent solution, it is known that he had a hair simulation by tattooing on the scalp. This is a tattoo technique to create scalp-looking hair, and it helped to make Jackson's hair look more natural. Jackson, who survived the accident with a severe burn, underwent plastic surgery at the California Medical Center to hide the burn scar. After the surgery, he donated $1.05 million to the hospital as a sign of his goodwill. As a thank you for this gesture, Brotman Medical Center in California named its burn department the Michael Jackson Burn Center. So Jackson, who developed a sense of empathy about burns after this accident, was especially interested in people undergoing burn treatment and covered their expenses. Just at this time, Jackson was impressed by what happened to a little boy named Dave and wanted to take care of him. Michael even gave Dave a job to take photos for himself and write a diary. So he was keeping Dave busy and making him feel valued. In fact, Dave created the visuals for Disney's Captain EO movie together with Michael. When Michael asked if he wanted his name to be written for the film, Dave replied, "No thanks, you're my friend." In interviews over the years, Dave has described himself not as a victim, but as a survivor. He always preferred to look at the full side of the glass. In an interview in 2016, Dave said, "There is a lot that happens in people's lives, but that doesn't define them as a human being. It makes them stronger." So he was saying that bad things that happen to people make them stronger. "But this has not changed me as a person," he said in the interview. "This has embellished my character and allowed me to grow in ways that no one can explain." He said that the event he experienced made him stronger. The difficult process he went through did not lead him to become a bad person. On the contrary, he had always tried to be good in life. In his life, after the incident, Dave's friends say that Dave was a peaceful, empathetic, and loyal man and confided in the secrets of people from all walks of life. Dave should have kept Michael's secret too. Dave owed a debt of loyalty to Michael, who helped him financially and spiritually during his most difficult period. On September 3, during his most difficult period, on September 3, 2009, it was time for Dave to pay off this debt. On the day of Michael's burial, which took place 3 months after the date of his death, there was a special guest on Larry King's program on CNN. Michael's close friend Dave was a guest of Larry King to talk about his friend Michael, but there was something interesting going on. Michael's fans who were watching the live broadcast were getting suspicious. Most fans thought that the person on the program was definitely Michael Jackson. They were not wrong in their thinking, because there was an obvious difference between the real Dave and the person on the program. Their facial expressions, shoulder width, voice, and eyes were very different.
A large amount from the confines of my father's criminality. He is a criminal, and his information was leaked. Myself from the confines of my father's criminality. Yeah, he is a criminal, and he.
There's crowds and bumper-to-bumper cars and...
It's all over. The girl is mine, and, this and that.
There's crowds and bumper-to-bumper cars and...
It's all over. The girl is mine, and, this and that.
This tree that I have at Neverland.
And brought me up to Neverland.
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 And my shoulder.
My shoulder.
Learned about me and know about me from a distance.
He heard about me, and he had contacted me and wanted to meet me.
Learned about me and know about me from a distance.
He heard about me, and he had contacted me.
Learned about me and know about me from a distance.
He heard about me, and he had contacted me.
Kids,
it was
leukemia kids. This is one of
many. Visit to his Encino house.
I wanted to have a place
and it was kept a secret
that I could create
by my mother.
Everything that I never had as a child. So you see rides, you see animals, there's a movie theater. I was always on tour, traveling, you know, and I never got a chance to do those things. So I compensated with these crowds and bumper-to-bumper cars, and so I create my world behind my gates. Everything that I love is behind those gates.
You know, this and that.
His eyes looked a lot like Michael Jackson's. He sounded just like Michael Jackson. His fans were starting to believe that Michael Jackson was alive now. That's exactly what Michael wanted, because Michael's fans were very upset about Michael's death. There were even reports that some of his fans had ended their own lives. Michael was on live TV doing crazy action. He wanted to relieve their sadness by giving a message to his fans that he was alive. That's why he was looking nervously at the camera as if he was saying, "I'm here, I'm alive." He had no doubt that his fans would recognize him. Millions of his fans after. This incident said that they started to believe Michael is alive after this. But why did Michael use Dave's disguise for this? Because Michael also wanted to give a message to his enemies. He wanted to say to those who wanted to kill and defame him, "Here I am." Dave's face was good for a disguise. But the important thing was not Dave's face, but his past. The message that Michael wanted to give was, those who wanted to defame him were his enemies, just like how Dave's father is an enemy to Dave. And in this situation, Dave was Michael. So his enemies wanted to destroy him, but he miraculously survived. He was undefeated. Dave got rid of his evil father, and Michael got rid of his enemies. Dave had given Michael his ID for one day. Because Michael was his friend, just like he said, the main message they wanted to give was very big. There were more important things in life than money, like friendship and loyalty. There was a greater power in life than evil, like good. Evil runs sprints, but goodness runs marathons. And goodness will win this marathon. Dave passed away in 2018 at the age of 42 due to pneumonia. He left behind a great friendship, a great loyalty, a great secret, because he was a beautiful friend, a wonderful confidant,